Distributed Denial of Service Attacks by Goins, Eastern Michigan University, IA 445, Ethical Hacking and Offensive Security, April 21st, 2022. What is a DDoS attack? A distributed denial of service attack, otherwise known as a DDoS attack, is a cyber attack that involves disrupting the normal traffic of a targeted server or network by overwhelming the target with a flood of internet traffic. These computers and other devices are infected with malware, which allows them to be controlled remotely by an attack. The devices on which the attack is carried out on are called a bot, and a group of bots is referred to as a botnet. An easier way to understand what a DDoS attack is to think of it as a traffic jam. The traffic jam is preventing the regular traffic from getting to where it needs to be. What is a DDoS attack continued? Below is a diagram of what a DDoS attack would look like. I obtained this graph from Technomantic. As you can see, the attacker is using the device, known as the bot, and is sending the disruptive traffic from his bot to the target victim's website or server. DDoS recent trends. DDoS attacks have risen over the past few years, and they will only continue to rise as time goes on, because how much technology we use will also continue to rise. The below graph shows just how much these attacks are continuing to grow. From 2018 to 2019 alone, there's a rise of 1.6 million attacks. The projected numbers for 2023 are as high as 15.4 million DDoS attacks in a single year. DDoS recent trends continue. There are more very alarming trends that are not good news for users. From 2020 to 2021, there was a 29% increase in ransom DDoS attacks. The DDoS attacks typically lasted 1 hour in 2020, but in 2021, that number went up to almost 4 hours. There was even some attacks that lasted for more than 10 days. According to studies done by Cloudflare, China and the United States had both the most DDoS activity by source country and DDoS activity by target country. These two countries seem to be in a cyber war with how much they're reducing and becoming the victim of DDoS attacks. Identifying DDoS attacks. Being able to identify a DDoS attack is just as important as knowing what one is. The first way is if a website or service suddenly becomes slow or unavailable, it is probably under attack. A better way to identify a DDoS attack is seeing suspicious amounts of traffic originating from a single IP address or range. Another good way to identify a DDoS attack is seeing oncoming flood or traffic from users who share a behavioral profile. Types of DDoS attacks. There are tons of different types of DDoS attacks. One of the most common types of attacks today are ransom. Ransom attacks are when the attacker takes something from the user, sometimes shutting down the website altogether, and then not putting it back up until a ransom is given, which is usually a payment. Ransom attacks are becoming the most common type of attack today, as the attackers can use a cryptocurrency, usually Bitcoin, to hide the transaction. Types of motivations for DDoS attacks. When you are trying to understand DDoS attacks and how to stop them, it is also important to know the motivation behind the attacks. The first type of motivation is ideology. This is when the attacker conducts the attack for political motives and shut down a website they disagree with. Next motivation is business feuds. Businesses will use DDoS attacks to try and take down competitors. Extortion is a motive that includes attackers trying to get money out of the attack, which is kind of like the ransom. How to prevent DDoS attacks. There are many different steps you can take to help prevent these attacks from occurring. The first is to become familiar with the typical inbound traffic profile. Knowing the typical amount of traffic is an easy way to spot these attacks. Having more bandwidth than you think you will need is a good idea so you can accommodate for sudden surges in traffic. Another very useful idea is to contact a DDoS attack mitigator or contact your ISP to learn ways to help prevent these from happening. Ways to prevent DDoS attacks continued. Defending at the network perimeter is another useful tip when dealing with these attacks. This includes rate limit your router to prevent your web server from being overwhelmed, add filters to tell your router to drop packets from sources of attack, timeout half-open connections, drop spoofed messages, and set lower SYN, ICMP, UDP flood drop thresholds. The last step you can take is to create a DDoS playbook. This includes documenting in detail every step of a pre-planned response when the attack is detected. DDoS prevention software examples. Using software to help prevent and reverse DDoS attacks is a very effective way to prevent these attacks. With so many different types of attacks out there, it is hard to find the right one. Some of the top types of software is Aptrana, SolarWinds, Security Event Manager, and Link 11. Most of this software offers that monitors traffic and alerts you of anything unusual. Most of the software is not free and requires a payment or subscription. Legislation concerning DDoS attacks. DDoS attacks are illegal in the United States. Big shocker, I know. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act was passed in 1986 that does many things, but it most importantly makes DDoS attacks illegal. Many nations around the world have very similar legislation as the United States. As the use of technology continues to increase, so will the number of DDoS attacks. Having proper legislation in place is important. Recent major DDoS attacks. On October 16, 2020, Google was attacked for 6 months using several networks to spoof millions of packets to numerous servers, and the ISPs were said to come from China. Amazon Web Services was hit in February 2020. The attack lasted for 3 days and it peaked at 2.3 terabytes per second. A European gambling company was attacked in 2021. The attackers demanded a large payment to be made or else they would strike again. Companies most affected by DDoS attacks. Tech Republic's data also shown that adults sites were the victim of the most DDoS attacks, which makes sense. They are trying to get money out of the attacks typically. Companies most affected by DDoS attacks continue. Tech Republic showed that gaming industries were the victim of the most DDoS attacks. As you see, games, gambling, and computers and internet were the top 3, with not much for business or finance. DDoS attack simulation. Conducting a DDoS simulation is a very good idea for many reasons. The first reason that companies should be conducting these simulations allows you to assess environment susceptibility to DDoS attacks. The next reason is they allow you to evaluate various mitigation solutions prior to purchase. The next reason is the simulation allows you to validate DDoS mitigation hardware and services once installed. The simulation will tell you if your mitigation hardware and its strategy is suitable for your network and work environment. Training the IT staff in DDoS identification and mitigation is another big reason why these simulations are so important. These simulations prepare your IT department to be able to spot and mitigate a DDoS attack properly. The simulation allows you to learn from mistakes and review what needs to be reviewed. The last reason is the simulation allows for compliance and DDoS certifications. The simulation involved sending bad traffic to a website to try and take it down. The simulation was successful, even though the website had a firewall that was supposed to block all traffic that was not HTTP and HTTPS. Below is a screenshot of the website once the attack was conducted. It is hard to tell, but in the search bar, it is trying to refresh the page, but is unable to because it is done. Conclusion. DDoS attacks are a very real threat to users today and their data. The recent trend is showing they are only becoming more prevalent. Knowing how to spot them, the different types and motivations, and ways to spot/mitigate them is very important. As technology continues to evolve and become even more prevalent in our society, it is important to know how to protect yourself and your data. There are so many different types of cyber attacks that it is truly scary how unprotected we really are. The end. Protect your data. References. References continued.